It started as a perfectly normal day. The hiker, let's call him Dan, was no stranger to the outdoors. But this time, he was hiking alone, a challenge he set for himself. The day passed uneventfully, the crunch of leaves underfoot, birds singing, and the distant hum of the forest. He loved the solitude, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, things began to change. Dan realized the trail back didn't look familiar. The landmarks he'd marked in his mind were gone, or maybe they had never been there to begin with. Panic set in, and with each step, the forest seemed to grow darker and more alien. Night had fallen completely, and Dan's flashlight was on its last legs. He was miles from civilization, surrounded by endless trees and shadows that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. Just as despair was about to consume him, he saw it. A cabin. It looked abandoned, the wood rotting and the windows coated in grime. But Dan had no choice. He knocked, his fist echoing against the hollow structure. No answer. He called out, but the forest swallowed his voice. So he stepped inside. What greeted him was odd. A single bed in the middle of the room, almost as if it had been waiting for him. Exhausted, Dan decided to rest, thinking he'd explain himself if the owner returned. But sleep didn't come easily. Around the room hung portraits, paintings of people, their faces eerily lifelike, their smiles unnerving. Each pair of eyes seemed to follow him, their expressions frozen, but filled with a strange malice. Dan told himself it was his imagination. Question finally took over, and he drifted into a restless sleep. When he woke, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of birds and insects, was eerily still. He sat up, and that's when he saw it. The paintings, every single one of them, were gone. Instead, the room was lined with windows. Windows that had been there all along. Dan's blood ran cold as he pieced it together. Those weren't paintings. They were windows, and someone, something, had been watching him all night. Without waiting another second, Dan bolted from the cabin, running until the forest thinned and the sun blazed overhead. He never looked back. To this day, Dan refuses to hike alone. And who could blame him? After all, what watched him that night? And more importantly, why did they let him go?